Paul and I have agreed to never work together again because we can't even look at each other at this point.
Look, before we get started with any of this, you might as well know right off the bat I had a vasectomy.
The idea that the first thing he says is, I just think you should know right off the bat I've had a vasectomy. We just start laughing.
You started.
No, you started.
I can see out of the corner of my eye.
You were like, just immediately like... He makes me laugh so hard. His eyes are bugging out and he's looking all over the place.
You might as well know right off the bat I had a vasectomy.
I'm so sorry. It's pathetic. Now I'm gonna laugh.
Action!
Hey, are you Joyce?
Hey, Harvey.
Hey.
So we finally meet in person.
Hey.
We do a lot of our scenes looking elsewhere because as soon as we look at each other, we start to laugh.
Look, before we get started with any of this, you might as well know right off the bat I had a vasectomy.
Luckily, we agreed that Harvey might not be able to look at her then. Paul Giamatti has sent me over the edge with the laughter. So that's it for us. It's over.
She's excellent. Thank God I'm working with her.
As we worked on the story, we realized more and more that we really didn't want to animate a whole lot of stuff because it's about comic books which don't move. So what we wound up doing a lot was creating environments that the character walks through and contextualizes the character inside of a cartoon world. In this sequence of the film, the actor was shot on a blue screen. He gives his whole speech. It was just this amazing performance. This performance, uninterrupted, was so strong that what we wound up doing was just trying to work around his movements. For example, here, on the blue screen, he just kind of walks backwards. He kind of choreographed it in his performance and the way he addressed the camera, so we kind of worked with that. In this particular case, he turns around and walks backwards, and he walks into a photograph of Cleveland. We treated it in the computer to kind of give it atmospheric elements and make it look like it was snowing and kind of a bummer day in Cleveland in the winter.
Harvey's at a supermarket, and he's stuck waiting in line behind an old Jewish lady, and then animated Harvey pops up and starts talking to him.
Man, old Jewish ladies will argue forever with a cashier about anything.
That's a fairly famous strip from American Splendor, and it's drawn by Robert Crumb. The drawings that we had Doug Allen do were drawn in the Robert Crumb style, except that they're drawn to look like Paul Giamatti. In the train station sequence, when Joyce sees various versions of Harvey Picar, because she's only seen him as a comic book character, and in the comic book it's always drawn by different artists. The first one that she sees is this really disgusting, hairy, ape-like Harvey, and that's the Robert Crumb style Harvey. And then there's a handsome Harvey drawn by Gary Dumm, but again, they're all done by Doug Allen, emulating that style because they have to kind of look like Paul Giamatti. And the idea is to show you what Joyce is thinking, what her idea of Harvey is going to be like, and then in the end you actually see them meet.
Are you Joyce?
Hey, Harvey.
Hey.
Whether or not she's disappointed is hard to say.
Toby is a genuine nerd.
Nerd, 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 nerd.
He's not an imitation nerd or some wannabe nerd.
Nerd, 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 nerd.
He's a genuine nerd. There's nothing he can do about it. It's in his blood.
I consider myself a nerd.
Sometimes just being around him and hearing what he had to say was worth going into work.
I recommend the pina coladas. They're excellent and very authentic tasting.
And he'd gone to a street fair and he picked up a button that said genuine nerd on it.
Nerd, 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 nerd.
And then he decided that he was going to become a nerd.
Judah had my part down pat.
What kind of girl is your new bride? Is she a nerd?
He had my mannerisms right, he had my voice right, he had my looks right.
This is my new do for the MTV generation.
It was almost like working with my twin brother if I had one.
This is Toby Radloff, the genuine spring break party nerd, signing off.
Crumb gave me instant credibility working with him.
Yeah, this is great stuff. I dig it.
He did this as a favor to this guy who we really cared about, Harvey.
Can I take him home and illustrate him?
Oh, wow, man!
That was just great.
You'd really do that for me, man?
I heard Harvey was on this set, and then he said to me, I gotta call Bob and tell him he's in good hands, meaning Bob Crumb.
I called him a few months ago to tell him about this movie because he's portrayed in it.
It's Robert Crumb, the character in a movie. It's not necessarily Robert Crumb, the man.
And I think he's portrayed pretty sympathetically.
There is some warmth there. It's just sort of, he doesn't betray it.
Pretty scary.
He wasn't at home, and he never comes to the Midwest anymore where I live because it's too depressing for him. It's almost too depressing for me.
This is a movie about a guy who writes comic books. The idea behind the title sequence was to, in the first few moments of the movie, really reacquaint you with the idea of what a comic book is. This leads out of an opening sequence, and that becomes the comic book page here. And we're actually moving around on the comic book page just as you would actually read a comic book. And that's actually real Harvey Pekar. So we've got the weird mix of Paul Giamatti, the real Harvey Pekar, and then to further confuse you, here is Robert Crumb's drawing of Harvey Pekar. But it gets the idea across. But in the end, it's really about Harvey Pekar and the life that he leads and the things that happen to him along the way, and comic books are just one part of that.